Hello, everyone. Welcome back. We're going to be getting into our next concept today of the mechanisms of evolution. In this first lesson, we're going to be going over a basic introduction to evolution, the 5 mechanisms, and we'll really be covering the first mechanism, which is natural selection. But before jumping in, just some recommendations about what you should probably have gone over first, right before coming here. Some concepts that might help you in this understanding. Probably some basic stuff in genetics, like what gene pools are, what that concept is in general, how that operates, what allele frequencies are, even mutations, right? Just what mutations are in general. Further from there, maybe some basic ecological principles as well. Very basically, just like what the ecological relationship of predation is, right? Predator and prey relationships. Other than that, we're just going to jump right in here. So the mechanisms of evolution. What are those? There are 5 of them. What are mechanisms? Mechanisms in general are just functional processes, right? Just how something works, how it happens. So evolution, and right, evolution is a biological process. Really, our working definition here is just gene pools changing over time. We know gene pools change, right? We know species change over time, and the 5 mechanisms explain to us how, right? How this actually happens, how we see these changes in the gene pool. So these 5 mechanisms are natural selection, sexual selection, sometimes also referred to as non-random mating, gene flow, genetic drift, and mutations. But today, here in this lesson, we're just going to jump into number 1, just with natural selection, and we'll have some follow-up lessons to go through the rest here. So starting with natural selection, right? So natural selection is very commonly summarized, you've probably heard this before, as survival of the fittest. Right, but okay, if we're not sure what natural selection is, then maybe just hearing it as survival of the fittest, that doesn't help either. So let's break down that, right? Let's break down survival and fittest. What do these mean? So if you're surviving, right, it means you're continuing to live. How do you do that? Well, you probably have to find food and water, right? You need to nourish yourself. You need shelter. You need somewhere to live. And you need to not get eaten, right? You need to be able to escape your predators. Those are really the 3 big things in terms of surviving. And if you're able to do that, right, if you have those traits and abilities that help you survive, we call those adaptations. These are the abilities, the traits that we have that help us survive, continue to live, find food and water, find the shelter, escape the predators. These are all good things, right? They're good things. Adaptations are very helpful. So now what does it mean to be the fittest? Now, we're not talking about fitness. We're not actually talking about going to the gym and working on the cardio, right? Or, getting your bulk on and pumping some iron. We're not talking about fitness in that sense. In this case, when we talk about fitness, being fit, right? The best fit, evolutionarily fit, right? Evolutionary fitness is a little different here. Here we're talking about how you fit into your environment. Are you a good fit for where you live, right? Are you a good fit for finding and obtaining the food that's around you? Or for being able to live there, right? Just make something that's in your environment into some shelter. Or if there are predators around, can you escape from them, right? All these things would mean you're a good fit if you can do them. So when you have these good adaptations, if you're a great fit for your environment, you survive, right? That's the first goal, is to survive in nature. So now we're going to take it a few more steps, right? It's kind of just like logical deduction from here, getting into the head of Darwin, right? So if you're surviving longer, right? If you're surviving for the longest, it means you're a good fit to your environment. And if you're around for years, if you're around for decades, just, in terms of probability and statistics, you're just going to be around longer. You're going to be around for more reproductive cycles. You're going to have more chances to reproduce. So when you're a good fit, you're going to increase your chances of reproducing. Right? You're just around. You're around longer. You're more available. So if you're surviving for longer, odds are you're reproducing for longer. This is making you really fit. You're a really good fit for your environment. You'd be a very fit organism. So now we're going to start to see, over the generations, over the years, over the decades, we're going to start to see your genes, your alleles, getting passed on more. Right? They're going to become more and more frequent. You're surviving the longest, you're reproducing more. You're a great fit. That means your offspring are now surviving longer, and they're reproducing more. They're a great fit. Assuming the environment isn't changing too drastically, right? Assuming. You might have to have active adaptations going on here. But otherwise, you're around for longer, you reproduce more, we're going to see your genes more in the gene pool, higher frequency of your genes in the gene pool. And this is natural selection, right? This is selecting for the fittest adaptations. We're going to see more of them over time. But this is just one trend that could emerge. We could also go the opposite way. We could select against certain traits, like the traits that are not a good fit. Those are ones we're going to see less, right? Because those organisms are not surviving, maybe like for even one reproductive cycle. So they're not reproducing, they're not passing those genes and alleles on, they're being selected against. We don't see them as often. They're going to start to disappear from the gene pool, right? Slowly over time, maybe down to very, very small frequencies. So this is basically how natural selection works. There are a few trends here, but let's try this in an example, right, that you would like see on a test, like a test question. So let's just start by reading the question, right? And let's just sum up what's going on here. So 1950s, we got fishers, right? So we have humans working as the predator in this case, and who's our prey? We're looking for pink salmon. So you have predator, humans, prey, salmon, and what are we doing? What's going on? Humans, pretty smart, right? We actually want to catch larger fish. So we want to be effective, right? We want to catch larger fish, so that means fewer fish, but with those fewer fish, we can feed more people. Makes sense, right? So from the fish perspective, we're going to start selecting against the larger fish. The larger fish in this case will not survive. They will not get to reproduce, right? They're getting eaten. We're eating them. So in this case, the fish that are being selected for are the smaller ones, right? The smaller ones can just swim out of the nets. So they're surviving longer. They're probably reproducing more. So in the gene pool for these pink salmon, we're going to see more and more alleles, more and more genes for smaller fish. So that's just by looking at the question, right? Just kind of breaking down what we would expect to happen based on natural selection. Who gets selected for, who gets selected against. How are we going to see this in the gene pool, right? It says over the next 20 years. That's a couple decades. Let's take this out. So when we get to the answers, we're looking for anything that says over time the salmon are going to get smaller, right? And that actually works out to be A, right off the bat. Average body size of the salmon population decreases. Makes sense, right? The smaller fish are being selected for, bigger fish selected against. So we're going to see a increase in the smaller fish and a decrease in the bigger fish. So B is the opposite of that. That's why B is incorrect. And C and D here, they're actually getting into sexual trends, which isn't always necessarily the case in natural selection, but this is definitely going to come up more in our next lesson when we look at sexual selection and non-random mating.